Awareness, the final frontier. These are the explorations of Jonathan Robinson and Brian Tom O'Connor. Their continuing mission, to discover fresh new paths to the mystery within, to seek out new joys and new methods of awakening, to boldly go into the heart of expanded consciousness. This is Awareness Explorers.
Well, welcome, fellow Awareness Explorers. Great to have you. We have a special guest explorer today that I'm excited to introduce, and his name is Michael Lydon. He is a realization process teacher. Realization process is a non-dual embodied meditation process that I think is great, and Brian just got introduced to it. And Michael's here to answer all our interrogation questions about this. And before I introduce him, let me just ask Brian, the heck are you?
I'm great, Jonathan, considering all the craziness that's going on right now. I'm healthy and relatively sane.
Which is not easy to do nowadays. And hopefully our fellow listeners are also making use of meditations and our podcast as a way of staying sane during these challenging times. And I'm doing really well, actually. Pandemics seem to work for me. I get to stay home and do less stuff, and it actually is a pretty easy time for me, although I feel for all the people who are having a hard time now. But let's get into it. As I said, Michael Lydon is a realization process teacher. You can find out more about him and his work at realizationconsulting.com. And I had the good pleasure to take a class from Michael recently, which I thought was great, and invited him onto the show to talk about this great method and approach to awakening. So welcome, Michael, to Awareness Explorers.
Thank you, Jonathan, and thank you, Brian, for having me on here. And I appreciate your feedback, Jonathan, with regard to that class. Yeah, I've been doing this as a realization process teacher, I don't know, for the past few years, just with my own practice.
Well, for those who don't know anything about the process or the background, can you give us a brief summary as to what it is and what it's trying to achieve?
Yes. So the realization process is, I would describe it as a body-focused pathway for spiritual awakening and psychological healing. And it was something that was formulated and still refined. The techniques are still, being refined here and there by Judith Blackstone, who is a retired clinical psychotherapist, and also she'd studied many forms of body work and meditation. And my understanding is that realization process really came out of her own journey towards healing. She's somebody who is just very attuned to subtle energy. I think, a bit of an outlier in terms of how sensitive she was to, subtle vibrations and different energies or qualities of consciousness and spiritual types of experiences and that sort of thing. And she also had this, her experience with body work and psychotherapy, and had different meditation schools, and had sort of taken the gems of all of those things and put them together into one thing.
I think that's a good description of what it is. What I found, and I'm no expert in this, but I've taken your class and I've read a couple of Judith's books. It seems to be like the best of various techniques, maybe 10 that I'm aware of really trying to get people into their body in a way that opens them up to non-dual awareness.
Yeah. So, right. And when I found the realization process, I had done a lot of subtle energy work, but I found that something about these embodiment techniques were different, because there was a depth of some of these experiences that were deeper than energy as pulsation and flow. We could say that we're tapping into what I would describe as steady state qualities of being that are related to our authentic self. By authentic self, I mean our sense of being as it feels continuous with being one with all that is, or one with the ground of being. And yeah, so when we talk about non-duality, right? Sometimes people talk about non-duality and they'll go like this, they'll make a movement around their head kind of like this, talking about expanded awareness, which is absolutely one of the ways which we can experience non-duality or experience the ground of being as this spacious awareness. And that in and of itself can be a powerful healing factor because we can get space from all of our issues, a higher perspective or a deeper perspective, and so forth. But if we want to talk about the ground of being, classically, and we could say also phenomenologically, we can feel it as something that's stillness, transparency, emptiness, luminosity, right? On the one side. And then the other side, it's presence or beingness, presence, aliveness. And my sense is that in order to fully experience that aliveness dimension of non-duality, it would make sense that we would be able to feel present through the instrument of our aliveness, which is our body and our energies and, the whole mind-body system.
I think that's excellent to hear because, a lot of people report in various non-dual circles a case where they're starting to feel sort of flat and uninvolved and dry. And, it seems to me that there's a kind of a mysterious power of simply sending our attention to the inner sense of our body that seems to awaken something that's sort of deep and beyond concepts and that might be able to help with that sort of sense of flatness. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that once a person sort of finds that spaciousness or that sense of non-duality experienced as awareness, then we can also experience that as emotion and as physical sensation. There's almost like so by emotion, one of the ways that we can feel that as love or as bliss, those types of qualities, and that adds a richness to it. And it's a richness that we can feel through the middle part of our body in addition to the expandedness up here. And when we can also feel into it as a kind of palpable sensory quality as well. And we can feel that more down through, our pelvis and the lower part of our body as this, but we can feel it also through our whole body at the same time. So there's an enrichment that can happen when it gets into the senses.
One of the things I liked about your class and the guided meditations you led is this idea that you're kind of tuning into different elements of this energy. So one of the class I think we took was something about love, light, and bliss.
Yes.
And you would kind of almost like a radio, you say, okay, well, tune into the light element of how this part of your body feels, or tune into the bliss element or the love element. And I found that once I was really in my body, that those were different flavors that were available to me and very enjoyable flavors. And before I was more tuning into just the sensory element, but you can kind of learn to tune into these different aspects of the energy. It's kind of like they're all there, but previously I was only seeing one color of the palette, and now it's more broad.
Yeah, right. And just like, and this is an analogy that I picked up from Judith, but it's kind of like the ocean. The ocean is one thing. It has different qualities. It's it's wet, it's wavy, it's salty, it's this, that, and the other. But it's one thing, and we can experience it in these different ways.
Yeah. And I found that really enlivening and opening. Another distinction that I found really helpful was the difference between being aware of a part of my body and being aware in a part of my body.
Yes. Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Sure. Actually, well, if we can engage the audience a little bit here, we can engage your listeners, we can actually do a little exercise if you want to.
Just
demonstrate this. Okay, cool. So we can start by just coming to sit up and becoming aware of our hands. If you want to close your eyes, you can. You don't have to. Just becoming aware of our hands. Your hands don't have to be in any special position, but we're just being aware of our hands. Might feel different sensations. Okay. Yeah, good. Okay. Second part of this exercise. Now come into your hands such that you feel that you're living inside your hands. Mm-hmm. Yeah, good. So, for those who are listening or watching this recording, if you're having any issues coming into your hands or feeling present through your hands, what you can do is very gently feel into how you would focus through your hands if they were to generate light. How would we focus into our hands such that they would generate a soft tone of light? Maybe we can even feel that we're made of light in our hands. That our sense of presence is a type of light that we can feel through the internal space of our hands. Okay. And so let's come back.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, Brian, I don't know if you've done this exercise before, so can we talk about it a little bit?
Absolutely.
Okay. So what was your sense? I don't mean to put you on the spot here too much, but what was your sense of the difference between the first part where you are aware of your hands versus when you're present through your hands?
Oh, a huge difference. I really, I really love that. When I was just aware of my hands, it was sending my attention to my hands did focus pretty well, and I started noticing sensations. But when I was really inside my hands, I felt that the center of awareness had shifted. In other words, it wasn't sort of me noticing my hands. It was me being my hands, being inside them. It's a little bit hard to put into words because the feeling for me is very, very nonverbal, but quite distinct, very pleasurable, kind of thick and rich and syrupy as opposed to sort of distant and analytical.
Yes, right. So in the beginning, you could kind of feel that distance, being aware of versus being, we could say being aware of versus being aware as.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And it also, Loch Kelly has a similar exercise where we are being aware from different parts of our body. And I found that extremely freeing because we start to loosen that idea that there is this center that's fixed, the center of awareness that's fixed.
Right. Yes. Yep. That's absolutely part of it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for me, it's the difference between being in my head and trying to attend to my hands and being in my hands.
Yes. Yep. Exactly. Yeah, that's it. One is third person, one is first person.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah. So hopefully that for the listeners out there, that will demonstrate the difference between, between just being aware or being aware of and being aware as, or being aware from within the internal space of our body.
I think that distinction can be one of the most powerful distinctions a person can make on the road to consciousness. And it's not something that really is discussed, that they are two very different experiences. And being aware in your body or from your body versus being aware from your head of your body are very different states of consciousness. Embodying involves being aware in your body. And that's really the beginning of using the body as an instrument of aliveness.
Right. Yeah, that's right. And Jonathan, I know that you're a clinical psychotherapist, or you're still practicing clinical psychotherapist. Okay. Yeah. Wonderful. And Brian, you used to be an actor, correct? Or are you still acting?
That's right. And I'm still, I'm now a singer, sort of musical comedy cabaret singer.
Okay. Wonderful. Yeah.
Totally the opposite of a clinical therapist, although there are some things in common.
Yes.
Well, in both therapy and the performing arts, we're using our body as an instrument of our emotions, right? Or we're kind of working with the body as an instrument of emotion.
Right.
And in somatic psychotherapy, it's been known for a long time that the body is a registry for our whole life experience and also our unconscious mind. And so when we're doing the body focused work, a lot of times we bump into things that we might otherwise not be aware of. When we're feeling through the internal space of our body, we might, if let's say we're doing this type of attunement work, we might attune to different types of presence or love or different qualities. Sometimes people will do that and they'll kind of bump into something. I feel kind of uncomfortable with this, in this area. And then little by little that can be the gateway towards healing something.
And in one of your classes, you talked about when you bump into that, releasing it, or how to go about releasing it, which is really, say, a somatic type of psychotherapy.
Yeah. Those types of techniques would definitely be part of somatic psychotherapy, and realization process can be used that way, and absolutely to provoke deep healings for sure.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about what that process is like?
Sure. I guess we're talking about like the release technique within the realization process.
Yeah.
So Trauma and the Unbound Body is Judith's newest book on this. But in chapter 8, she gives a good deal of attention to the release technique. And basically what I found when I went through the training on this, I was like, it has to be more complicated than this. It can't be this simple, right? Because all we were doing was focusing into the constriction, allowing it to tighten, and then releasing our focus, allowing the constriction to release. So when she started describing it, I was like, this just sounds way too simple. But the nuance here is that when we go through difficult life experiences, our whole mind-body system organizes itself along a certain shape and pathway. And we could say there's a pathway of the fascia, or like the soft tissue in our body that goes into a certain constriction. And there's the experience that we're trying to protect ourselves from, or a feeling that we're trying to hold in after that point. And a lot of this happens just unconsciously. But as we get older and we start to work on these different pain points, we can start to feel like, oh yeah, there's a constriction there. And if we pay attention, we can actually feel the kind of shape and organization of it. And it's like, if you think of a piece of fabric going into a twist, right? There was a physical thing that happened that made the fabric go into a twist. And so all we do is we follow the shape and kind of you follow the constriction and allow it to release along the same pathway. That's all it is. Although there's nuance and complexity there as well, and depth. But that's the essence of it. There was a certain pathway along which we were wounded, and there's a shape of the way that pathway takes hold in our body, and we're just following that same pathway and allowing the pain that's there to be released along the same pathway.
I love the simplicity of it. I'm wondering if you could say a little bit more about because when you presented it before, it was kind of a two-step process. Mm-hmm. I got the step about, focusing on it and feeling into the contraction, so to speak. But say more about what allows it to release.
Yeah. So my sense of this is that there's something like, all right, so let's all do another little exercise here. Okay. I can always demonstrate things a little bit better with exercises. Okay. And this is for the audience as well. So let's all, so trigger warning here, I'm going to traumatize everybody just a little bit, but it's just enough to be instructive. Okay. So let's all think the thought, I need to be perfect. And let's just really feel into the intent of that thought of I need to be perfect. Okay. And so, yeah, we might feel that even though this is something that is maybe even biased a little towards towards the positive in terms of the value system of our culture, needing to be perfect or needing to be good, needing to be this, that, and the other, these things that are considered positive in certain ways, right? We can feel how harsh that actually is on our mind-body system. So let's let that thought go, or that directive go about needing to be perfect. Okay. So, all right. So the idea here is that I think that so there's the question of what is held, right? Which is emotional content, memory, meaning, feeling. That's all held in the body in these areas of constriction, what some people call energy blocks, right? That's what's held. And then there's a question of what's doing the holding. And my sense of that is that it's volition. There's, whether it's the degree to which that it's conscious or unconscious varies, but it might be a volition or purpose that we have that's protective. It might be something that we need to stay connected to, let's say, our family of origins by mirroring them in certain ways. It might be nurture or lack thereof. Maybe we were rewarded for being smart, but we weren't nurtured for our emotional sensitivity. It might be.
Well, really, you don't really need to know, because all you really need to know is that there's some holding or something going on. The reason I say that is because while you were discussing this, your cat was on your lap, and I was saying I need to be perfect, and I realized when the cat was showing up, there was a little bit of tension. I need this podcast to be perfect.
Oh, yeah.
So I was feeling just a little bit of what you're talking about. And I don't really need to know where that came from psychologically, but in that moment there was a tension. Yeah. And by focusing on that tension, that tension, by giving the tension attention, so to speak, it became more aware. And then I was able to release it because I realized it doesn't need to be there. There's no reason it has to be there.
Right. Yeah. Right. And some things that are, let's say, more that are not as deep or pervasive, we can have just a moment like, oh, okay, well this is actually okay. The cat's all right. She'll be okay.
Yeah. Right.
Maybe it'll even increase viewership. Now that there's a cat. The internet seems to really be fond of cats. But for things that are deeper and more pervasive, then it can be important to feel into what the purpose is there. So for instance, like, I'll just give my own example. When I was at this training, I kept having this sense of like rightness, like needing to do things right. And, there was somebody that had like something with poison ivy. And I was like, shoot, I don't have a first aid kit. I couldn't do anything for them. And, but this was something a little extra. There was some real anxiety around this. And there was kind of like a harshness, or what I would call like a sharp edge thought to this needing to do things right and be right and that sort of thing. And when we were doing the release technique, I could start to feel all this sadness that was coming up from deep within. And I could even feel it, moving up through my body. And I realized that this needing to do things, quote unquote, right, I was trying to be close with somebody unconsciously. That was carrying out the purpose of being close with somebody emotionally, with whom that was the only way that I felt I could be emotionally close with them, by mirroring their, let's say, moral attitude towards the world. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I would not have known that if not for that, feeling into that pocket of constriction in the body.
So by realizing that, did it automatically start to release, or was there something that you did in that moment to help it release?
I feel like there was something like a pancake. There's like you could look at it sort of like a layer cake, and the tightness of the constriction and the discomfort there, sort of feels like, an emotional and spiritual UTI, right? There's a discomfort. And so, once you start to, in my experience, once we start to feel into the constriction, that's the first layer of it. It's the discomfort. And then you release a little bit, you go in, you release a bit more, and it gets more subtle. And the physical aspect or discomfort of it gets more subtle. And then there's emotional content that seems to reveal itself. And we can feel what it is that we're trying to protect, or what it is that what experience we're trying to keep out, what experience we're trying to not have or preserve in some way,
Right.
And then there's the realization of like the purpose, the purposefulness behind that holding. It's like this, right? If we're doing meditation, and let's say in the advanced attunement to fundamental consciousness, there's the attunement to our quality of gender, and through our pelvic, through our pelvis. And so let's say that every time somebody gets to that attunement, it's like they kind of have that type of experience, like they're just uncomfortable all of a sudden. And if they felt more deeply into that, they might feel a reflexive kind of shutting down of that quality. And if they pay attention more deeply, they might feel the purpose for which they're shutting that quality down. For somebody, it might be, if it's something quite deep, it might be like, I don't want to be, sexually visible to this type of person or that type of person. Right? That might be the purpose that's being held there. And then once that becomes known, the person can work with it more deeply.
Yeah, that makes sense. And when you are going from the awareness of the tension to the releasing aspect of it, I think you mentioned one time that you're kind of just like letting go into your beingness, or how did you describe that?
Yeah. So, what it would be is like, focusing into the constriction. And when we do that, by the way, so as I'm describing this technique, I'm not advising that anybody do this as I'm describing it. I'm just describing it. And there's always, especially when we're doing work that might bump into trauma, there's always the consideration of resourcing or making sure that we're in a good space to do this first before we do this. So I'm just describing the technique. I'm not advising that anybody try this as I'm describing it, but I'm just describing the method of it. So focusing into the constriction, just by focusing into a constriction, we can notice that seemingly it spontaneously constricts a little bit further. And so we can hold our focus there for a minute, and then when we release our focus, if that's what you're referring to, what we're doing is just sort of like relaxing back. That's my sense of it. We're just kind of relaxing back in our body, or we can attune to the quality of love and acceptance, and as a way to deepen the sense of release. And as we release, it's almost like, trapped air, or like some of the dry ice that lives there gets to sort of melt away a little bit, and that whatever the constriction or holding pattern is, the emotion and feeling that's there gets to breathe a bit. And then, and it's a very organic thing in the way that it unpacks. Yeah.
That's a great description.
Thank you.
Brian, you're more new to this. Anything that comes up to you that you want to ask?
Sure. I have a couple of questions and an observation. Maybe I'll start with the observation. Jonathan, you were kind enough to send me a sample of some of Michael's exercises. And the first time I listened to them, I realized that my mind was being literal and it was being a little bit obstinate. And so you would say things like, experience your feet as made of light. And I would say, well, I'm actually not experiencing my feet as made of light. And then that night, I had this dream. And in the dream, I was doing your exercises and my whole body was just vibrating and glowing and just filled with a kind of an unnameable presence. So I said, let's go back to this again. And then I remembered what in my own awareness games teaching, I say, you don't have to believe any of this is true. In fact, you even if all you're doing is imagining that it is so. And I went back and I just imagined my feet were made of light. I just said, okay, I'm not going to tell myself any of this is true. I'm going to say, what if it were? And it was like night and day. And I experienced the same exercise. So I felt deeply and embodied. And I felt that I was experiencing existence in my body in a whole new, deeper, fuller, richer way. So it was really cool.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I've got to say, I am peanut butter and jealous about that dream.
Well, that's nice. Maybe I'll send it to you.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds wonderful. Although this is sort of in another direction here a little bit, but yeah, if we become lucid in our dreams, absolutely, we can continue to do some of these exercises. There's not a discussion in realization process about dream yoga or things like that, but certainly if that's something that we can do, then yeah, absolutely.
Well, it was the next day after I woke up that I went back to it. It was the dream that just said, try it again, because you may go deeper.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And about the imagination, I mean, basically, I was sort of applying my own spin to it, but I felt I got to the same place you were heading towards. What do you think?
Yeah. So let's see if we can find a difference here, and just to experiment. So let's feel our presence. You can feel it in your hands or through your whole body, whatever you prefer. And let's see if we can feel a kind of radiance in this presence. Even if we only feel that radiance by a few percent, or to whatever degree we feel it. Yeah, so we have a feeling of radiance. Can we open what feels like a deep part of the mind, or open a deep threshold in our awareness, such that we can open to a kind of almost sightless visual sense of this radiance, so that we're feeling this radiant presence as a form of light. So in this case, it's something that we're just opening ourselves to. If it helps, you can find the center of your head between your ears and feel that there's something like an eye of the mind that's opening here. There's something like an inner eye that opens to this luminosity. As we do this, we might even feel an opening through the whole core of our body as we open this inner vision of the mind, or a kind of sightless visual sense of awareness. Okay, and let's come back. How was that?
I loved it. Excellent.
Okay.
It was rich. It was, I felt guided there. I'm not sure what that means, but.
Yeah.
Well, that could be our guided meditation. I felt that too. I'm wondering, Michael or Brian, if either you have any last questions or comments that you want to make that haven't already been touched upon.
I do, actually. I wanted to circle back a little bit to some of the things you alluded to earlier, because when we think of the name, the realization process, we want to know, well, what is it exactly that's being realized? And you talked about the ground of being and non-dual awareness. So I was wondering if you might be able to give us sort of a high-level view of how the process leads to that realization and what that realization specifically is.
Sure. So my 3-sentence summary of the realization process is this. There is a domain of being that's at once the ground of being, but also a continuity that we feel through our own sense of presence, our authentic self. And this ground of being, or this domain of our authentic self, has never been wounded and can't be wounded. And that's something that we can feel. It's palpable, right? It's an experience that we can have. When we attune to that domain of being, we awaken and heal at the same time. So, what do we awaken to? We could say that consciousness awakens to itself. So, yeah, that's an interesting question. I feel like, yeah, we could think about just different domains, subdomains of being that become more enlivened and that become kind of more filled out or matured, and, you know, stabilized in this deep sense of balance, love, deep awareness, a kind of stability. Yeah.
Those qualities that you described seem to be the qualities of the ground of being itself.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. And is there a second part to that statement?
No.
Okay.
That was just a comment along the way.
Yeah, right. And so, yeah, within, I guess we could, one way of languaging it would be something like this. And this is just my sense of it. That, if we think about we can feel this ground of being that feels perfectly balanced, never been wounded, can't be wounded, et cetera, et cetera. We can feel that substrate underneath everything. And so when we allow ourselves to feel into different areas of our being and attune to that substrate or some quality of it at the same time, there's almost like a spiritual chiropractic that happens that just sets different parts of ourselves into alignment. And that's how I like to think about realization process, or any deep spiritual work for that matter. You know, we're kind of helping these parts of ourselves well, this is just me. My sense of it is that we're doing some sort of partnership with the divine. I don't know if that's okay to say on this podcast.
Absolutely.
Okay.
No, you'll be banished to hell forever for that.
But
I love that metaphor, Michael. I also like the metaphor of the spiritual chiropractic that call it God beingness is the chiropractor, and you are allowing yourself to be in that cauldron, and things get healed as a result.
Yeah.
I get that for sure. And I like those metaphors. And, for our listeners, we're just touching the surface of the realization process. What I like about it, because I'm an experience and method junkie, is that, a lot of embodied practices just have like one or two distinctions, feel your body or something. But in the realization process, I found that there were a lot of distinctions, a lot of methods, some of which we touched upon here, and that they are tools to play with and see what works for you. There was a couple of things in the class I took with Michael that, that doesn't really work for me so much. And then he'd say, try this. And I'd go, wow, everybody should try that one. So I like it when a system provides a lot of different approaches and allows you to see what works for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that as well. I mean, and I thought that I was a pretty tough nut to crack in terms of just all the suffering that I felt I was going through in my 20s and early 30s. So, I mean, having a lot of the work of deepening our contemplative development and our own self-healing is learning good tricks.
Yeah.
That's frankly a lot of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, this has been great. I'm wondering, Brian, do we need to do another meditation or should we use the ones that we had?
We could use the ones that we have, unless, Michael, you have another one up your sleeve that you'd like to share.
It's really up to you, yeah.
I think we've got it. We covered a few.
Yeah, we did.
I could absolutely edit those together as our meditation, because usually I excerpt them as well. And I could take them and edit them together.
Okay. Yeah. That seems, I'm totally okay with that.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds great. So I want to let people know how to get hold of you. You're at realizationconsulting.com.
Yep.
One of the things I liked about your website is that you actually have some short meditations on there and some free resources, as well as the classes you teach. And Judith Blackstone has a bunch of books as well, the founder.
Yes, Judith has a number of, obviously foundational books on the realization process. And if people want some of those, like a good collection of those pointers, techniques, and just to get some experience in the realization process, I would strongly recommend the Sounds True audio program, which is just called the realization process.
Mm-hmm. Great. Anything else you want to add before we normally do our blah, 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 which is, tell your friends and family about awarenessexplorers.com, lots of meditations. We have a donate button, all that stuff. But anything you want to add as well?
You know what? There is one more thing that had come to mind before, but it slipped away, but I'm just remembering it. Mm-hmm. That one of the ways that we can think about non-duality that I found quite helpful is to have a non-adversarial relationship with any aspect of our experience. Because if we're assuming that all of this stems from the divine, that there's, the divine in each of us, and there's the divine in, all of matter and all of plant life and animal life, et cetera, it's also in our experience, is we could say that if we're suffering, then it's some aspect of that fundamental energy that's just a little bit skewed away from balance. And if we do some of this work, then we can bring ourselves back into alignment. But I feel like that non-adversarial tone towards any aspect of our experience, that's important, because sometimes when people when we're in the non-dual milieu and we bump into a pain point, we're just like, oh, how do I just meditate on this until it goes away? Or, how do I get rid of Satan? Oh, did I say Satan? I meant my narrative self, right? so anyway, yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
Well, no, I like that a lot. Go on, Brian.
I'm so glad you brought up that last point. It's really excellent and important for us to remember. And I'm also so glad that you mentioned you were a hard nut to crack, because so was I, and I think many listeners might feel that way. And then just again, thank you for your presence and your eloquence and your techniques and insights.
It's been such a pleasure. I really appreciate you, having me on the podcast here. So, is there anything I can say to like plug the podcast?
Tell your friends and family, by having people who are exploring with you, mm-hmm. as you know, it really accelerates our own progression. Yeah. And I really appreciate you and I got a chance to explore some stuff together on a phone call, and really we walk each other home. So that's what this is all about. And I really appreciate how much you've put out what you know and have helped me and other people. So thank you. And we always tell our listeners at the end, the most important thing is always to keep exploring.
Absolutely. Amen. Yeah, keep exploring. And it's just great that you guys put all this out there for free, and to get people exposed to this. It's really great. So thank you for the work that you do.
You're very welcome.
Our pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us, and keep exploring. Thank you for listening to Awareness Explorers. To learn more, you can check out our website at awarenessexplorers.com. Please subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Google Play, or your favorite podcast app. And we'd love it if you would post a review. And please share our link on Facebook and with family and friends, because knowing yourself as awareness is the greatest gift you can give yourself or someone you love.